would you believe me if I told you that this guy was one of the most sought-after strikers in Europe just over a decade ago? When Sergio Aguero left Atletico Madrid, he was considered the immediate successor, and only a few years later would become a Premier League club's record signing. Despite machine gunning his way to the top of European football, Paulo Daniel Osvaldo retired at the age of only 30 to focus on music. But that was back in 2016. Recently, he's been in the news a fair bit because of this 10-minute long cry for help that he posted to his Instagram.
Tengo una enfermedad muy específica, falta de autoestima, depresión, muchas veces vuelvo a caer en mis adicciones por enojo, caigo en la autodestrucción. Y eso destruye también a la gente que está a mi alrededor.
This self-destruction was evident throughout his career, and today I want to look at some of the concerning patterns from his time as a professional, while also considering the broader implications of a footballer's cry for help. Okay, so whatever you remember of him as a player, Osvaldo was unpredictable. I mean, shit, the guy couldn't decide if he was a musician or a footballer, let alone what country to play for. You see, Osvaldo was born in Lanús, Argentina in 1986. He came from humble beginnings, living near a villa or a shanty town. In an interview with El Gráfico, he recalls how his family would save up all their money so that no matter what, he could afford his bus pass for football practice. In a house full of Banfield fans, Dani stood alone as a Maradona fanboy moved by a passion for Boca Juniors, and he would regularly go to games at La Bombonera in his teenage years. He played for Lanús, Banfield, and Huracan's youth systems. Dani was quick, powerful, and acrobatic, a truly elite kind of striker. His first years as a professional were turbulent, to say the least. Some might say he burst onto the scene at Huracan after making his professional debut at the age of only 19, with 11 goals and 33 appearances in his first season as a professional. This return earned him a move to Italy's second tier, where Atalanta owned him but immediately loaned him to Lecce for more playing time. When he played, he was solid, but when he didn't, Osvaldo was overcome with homesickness. According to him, he cried almost every day during his first years in Italy because of how out of place he felt. But at least he had just married his longtime girlfriend Nina Oettlinger, who moved from Argentina to be with him. The two had known each other since they were children, where she gave him the nickname Danny Stone because of his love for the Rolling Stones. They even had a kid together in Bergamo in 2006. That's great, right? It ought to cheer him up. Apparently not, because he decided to leave his wife and newborn to have another kid with local Italian architect Elena Braccini that same year. I guess he's just trying to assimilate to life in Italy. Not a great look. We'll get back to this in a minute. Anyways, after a fairly impressive debut season for Lecce, Fiorentina brought him to Serie A for 4.6 million euros in 2007. He took Gabriel Battistuta's number and his celebration, which would also become an Osvaldo trademark. His numbers at Fiorentina weren't out of this world, as despite all his ability, Osvaldo struggled to hold down a starting spot, managing only 13 Serie A appearances in his first season. He did manage an iconic winner against Juventus, but got sent off for his celebration shortly after. This sort of sums up his whole career. The situation at Fiorentina was made even worse when they brought in Adrian Mutu and Alberto Gilardino to bolster the front line for a return to the Champions League. Nonetheless, Osvaldo was called up to the U21 national team, a call-up which he accepted because he had qualified for citizenship through his great-grandfather and wasn't getting a look in from the Albiceleste. Dani scored the winning goal in a youth tournament for the Azzurri, even further proof of his undeniable talent. After a year and a half with La Viola, where he never really settled, Bologna came in for the striker in the summer of 2009. Despite a strong start, the Argentine struggled to adapt, managing a measly 3 goals in 13 games. As would become customary with Osvaldo, he wanted out. In January 2010, Osvaldo was on the move again. Mauricio Pochettino's Espanyol came to his rescue, agreeing to a 6-month loan with Bologna for his services. Dani settled in nicely in Barcelona. He was playing well and even stated his desire to make the move permanent before the season was over. His wish came true in the summer of 2010 for a fee of 4.6 million euros. Osvaldo was now a nailed-on starter for the first time in Europe. He was playing for a great young coach who was also a compatriot and a mentor. It finally seemed that he had found his home in Catalunya. His first full season in La Liga, Osvaldo netted an impressive 13 goals and 3 assists in 24 games, despite missing 2 months through injury. In the summer of 2011, with his transformation to Johnny Depp nearing completion, the 25-year-old Osvaldo was on the cusp of his prime. Atletico Madrid looked to him as a replacement for Sergio Aguero, but eventually went in for some Colombian guy, I don't know. So Osvaldo would end up at AS Roma for a fee of 15 million euros that eventually rose to 17.5 million with add-ons. It was an exciting time to move to the capital. Roma experienced a massive slump after an impressive 09-10 season, competing with Mourinho's Inter, finishing in a measly 6th place in 2010-11, which kept the Giallorossi out of the Champions League. But in the summer of 2011, desperate to return to their former glory, the club tried to copy the success of the Barcelona model. This included hiring Barcelona B coach Luis Enrique, along with funding an 83 million euro spending spree, which brought the likes of Lamela, Bojan, Pjanic, and Ainsa to complement Osvaldo, the jewel in the crown. Needless to say, the team should be competing for titles again. Things now looked like they were finally heading in a normal direction for Osvaldo's career and life in general. He was expecting a second kid with Elena Braccini, he had a stable place in a strong European team, and in October would receive a call that irreversibly altered the trajectory of his career. Cesare Prandelli offered Dani a spot in the Italian national team over the phone when he was in the car with Argentine teammate Gabriel Heinze. When Osvaldo expressed some doubt over accepting, the Argentine's response was, "You said yes, right? Don't be an idiot, call back and say yes." When they travel, they wear Dolce & Gabbana. This apparently was enough to convince Osvaldo, a very solid reason for joining the national team. As always, this generated controversy. After all, the guy had only moved to Italy as an adult, was born and raised in Argentina. How Italian could he really be? Osvaldo said his wife and kids were Italian, which meant he had to be as well after spending his entire adult life there. But just as he professes his Italianness to the entire world, Osvaldo's heart was still, evidently, in Argentina. With his newest kid on the way, he decided to hit up an Argentine actress named Jimena Barón over the phone and subsequently flew to Argentina to begin an affair with her. Are we starting to see a pattern here? Unsurprisingly, Elena Braccini then divorced him, so I guess he just wasn't Italian anymore. Oh, and Roma fared about as well as Osvaldo's marriage in 2011-12. Though Osvaldo didn't have the worst season numbers-wise, the team was a disaster. In a 2-0 loss against Udinese in November, he lost his cool and hit teammate Eric Lamela in the face for not passing him the ball, which led to the club banning Osvaldo for 10 days. He got 2 pretty egregious red cards in the league, which saw him miss a further 4 games, and he also conveniently missed a month in the middle of the season, again, a la Neymar. The next season at Roma was much the same as the first. Luis Enrique's replacement Zeman got the sack halfway through, Aurelio Andrezzoli took over as a caretaker, and participated in a yelling match with Osvaldo, who couldn't handle being a sub in the Coppa Italia final and took to Twitter to express his discontent. That's not even to mention his biggest on-pitch scandal of 2014, where he took a penalty away from the designated taker and club legend Francesco Totti, only to miss it, which certainly did not help his image. And when he got suspended for a league match against Lazio, Roma's biggest rivals, he was photographed vacationing in London with Jimena Barón during the game. This guy really does not help himself, does he? Prandelli took note of all this, and despite Osvaldo's form for the national team, his attitude cost him a spot in Italy's squad for the Confederations Cup in 2013, and eventually the World Cup in 2014 as well. This whole fiasco made his relationship with the Roma fans and ownership sour. Just as Roma were ready to discard him, an old friend came back into the frame to reignite Osvaldo's career with his talent still evident as ever. Mauricio Pochettino, now at Southampton, convinced the board to sign Osvaldo for a club record fee of £15 million. Despite a promising start, Osvaldo struggled to adapt to English football. Pochettino was disappointed in the version of Osvaldo that he received. Irritable, lacking discipline, and generally more interested in cosplaying Jack Sparrow and fistfights than he was in playing professional football. I'm not exaggerating, by the way. He was constantly dressed as like a knockoff Johnny Depp, and in his first season in England, Osvaldo got 2 suspensions for fighting. One was a touchline scuffle against Newcastle, and the second was for headbutting his own teammate Jose Fonte in training, all before Christmas. This meant Osvaldo was back on his way to Italy by January 2014, joining Juventus on a 6-month loan to see out the season. He won the Scudetto with them, but did nothing much else, except for scoring his only league goal against Roma at the Olimpico. Just great. This was followed by loans to Inter, where he got dropped because he beefed too hard with captain Mauro Icardi, then ditched training, and to Boca Juniors, where he seemed to find his footing again. It was an important moment on a personal level, moving back to Argentina now as an Italian, with Jimena Barón and their newborn son, who he cheated on shortly after their return to his home country. Definitely seeing a pattern emerge here. Apparently, when they broke up, he was saying some pretty nasty things about her, calling her a prostitute. Yeah, pretty ugly stuff. But playing for the team he supported as a kid in an 11-game run, Osvaldo managed to etch his image into the minds and hearts of Los Chineses. He fought, played with passion, scored in the league and the Libertadores, and had this iconic moment telling Estudiantes defender to eat grass after he had called him a donkey earlier in the game. He was kind of a notorious shit talker. Southampton finally terminated his contract in the summer of 2015. Pochettino had some pretty negative things to say about the club record signing, who started off the next season in Porto. Kind of random. But he couldn't bear to be away from Boca for too long, so he terminated his contract in January and rejoined Los Chenese for one last rodeo. It wasn't too great of a send-off because Osvaldo got his contract terminated after only 3 games when the coach found him smoking in the changing room. I guess a guy just can't have fun anymore. All this meant one thing for Osvaldo: retirement. At the age of 30, the man who was once the most promising striker in Europe, playing for the Italian national team, was now done playing so he could focus on music, founding his band Barrio Viejo with some old friends from Barcelona. He still had offers from teams in Europe. He could have gone to China for a cash grab, but in his own words, he preferred music, asado, and beer. He came out of retirement briefly to play for his father's favorite club, Banfield, in 2020. The chairman of the club told the press that if he caught his new signing smoking in the changing rooms like he did at Boca, Osvaldo would have to go up to his office and personally offer him a cigarette as well. Despite the sentimentality of it all and a randomly strong performance against River Plate, Osvaldo only saw out half of his year-long contract, retiring for good in July of 2020.
Me hace no tener ganas de ver a mi familia, de no tener ganas de compartir cosas con mis hijos.
In case you can't tell from his career path, this guy is all over the place. He was constantly ruining good relationships that he had, fighting with people that were meant to support him, one of the most infuriating cases of absolute self-destruction that there is in the game. When he was on form and taking things seriously, this guy was really incredible to watch. And those details about his personal and romantic relationships prove this as well. I'm not trying to dogpile on the guy, but the treatment of his exes and his children led to a very negative image of him in the press, and he was never too interested in addressing it. The mothers of his children were simply asking for their child support money and for him to see the kids more often, but he'd rather tour and do press junkets for his band, which, let's face it, is dog shit. The thing that spurred him on to come out with this video addressing his mental health the other day was that he had an outburst at his most recent ex, falsely alleging that she had been disloyal. Too many patterns here. One of the first things he does in this video is apologize to her, explaining that he's seeking professional help but has been out of sorts for basically his entire adult life. This includes anger issues and inability to properly form personal relationships, along with substance abuse and general depression. There's a fair number of people saying that they can't forgive him because of his treatment of his kids and their mothers, but the people that seem to know him best, including his former romantic partners, have said that his addictions to drugs and alcohol have kept him from being the best boyfriend, husband, and father he could, which he too admits in the video. He comes off as genuine and very desperate to me. He obviously should be held accountable for being a deadbeat dad, no question about it. But the fact that he came out with a video asking for help and forgiveness to me shows a sincere attempt to improve on his mistakes. The amount of times he mentions his kids in the video suggests that he feels deeply guilty for how he's behaved. And I think that instead of saying we can't empathize with him or that anyone who does is ignoring the abandonment of his children, we should focus on supporting him in his quest to improve his mental state and achieve sobriety so that he can be the best possible father going forward. I don't know, that's just my take. I would encourage you to watch the full video and make up your own opinion about it. But one of the reasons I was compelled to make this video in the first place was because I believe it's a positive that a former pro with a bad boy image is addressing the damage he has caused, and for once not feeding into the legend of Dani Osvaldo the loose cannon, but rather reevaluating his harmful life choices. Let's hope that more footballers can feel comfortable opening up like this so we don't see talent, but more importantly, lives go to waste. He said something that really touched me in the video.
Porque nunca me interesó el dinero. Yo nací pobre y puedo morir pobre, eso no me importa, pero lo que más me duele es que me estoy empobreciendo acá en el alma y yo siempre fui buen amigo, buen compañero, quise ser buen padre, aunque muchas veces no me salió. Pero bueno, hago este video para que al que le interese que entienda que muchas veces mis actitudes vienen desde un lugar de mí que no puedo controlar, que no puedo manejar.
For a man who is so often defined by his talent, temper, and drama outside of football, I think that this level of vulnerability is a big step. With football teams becoming stricter and the increased scrutiny on day-to-day activities where footballers are meant to be media training machines with unblemished public images, players like Osvaldo become rarer. But that doesn't mean that they cease to exist, or that players who are great now aren't suffering from similar issues of depression and substance abuse, or that they won't face them further on down the line. I hope to see some positive reinforcement for him and anyone else who needs it. I'm not just saying this because of the great player that we missed out on, but also the human decency that this guy and many others are robbed of the second they step into the spotlight. This video shouldn't absolve him of all wrongdoing or anything, but it shows a really important step in the right direction. A transparency, a humanity in our footballers. They aren't gods, they're just people who are really good at a sport. Thanks for watching. I'd like to hear what you make of all this in the comments. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.